has given the most remarkable, devoted service to the Queen, to my family, and to the country, and also to the whole of the Commonwealth.
The words were spoken slowly, but their impact struck the monarchy like thunder. King Charles had made his decision. Before a restricted gathering of senior royals, constitutional advisors, and stunned palace officials, the monarch formally proclaimed Catherine as Queen Regent, transferring the daily authority of the crown into her hands. William did not move. Camilla's expression hardened, and as Catherine rose from her chair, everyone in the room understood that royal history had just been divided into a before and an after. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles placed the signed proclamation on the table and let the silence grow. A proclamation was a formal royal announcement carrying the sovereign's authority. This one named Catherine as Queen Regent, meaning she would carry out the crown's central duties while the king stepped back from active leadership. He would remain sovereign, but she would guide audiences, briefings, schedules, and the senior royal household. Catherine gripped the arm of her chair. She had prepared for years to stand beside William, not to be called forward before him. The monarch watched her and made the burden plain. This was not a ceremonial honor, and every choice would carry consequences for the family, the government, and the future reign. She rose after he placed his pen beside the document. "The monarchy cannot pause simply because I must," he said. Her voice trembled, then steadied. She would serve without hesitation. William felt pride collide with fear. The prince knew his wife had earned the trust in that room, yet he understood what duty could take from a marriage. Catherine would face decisions that could separate her from their children, expose her to public anger, and reshape their partnership. He looked at her, but she did not turn. Camilla received the decision without protest, but the queen consort understood what had been denied. She would keep her title and ceremonial place beside Charles, yet she would not share the regency authority. State briefings, royal audiences, and household commands would pass through Catherine. Then an advisor lifted a sealed supplementary instruction and removed it before most of the family could read a line. Across the table, officials lowered their eyes, aware that no retreat remained possible. The doors opened. Catherine stepped into the corridor and found Camilla waiting. The queen consort's face was cold, controlled, and deeply wounded. No words passed between them, but the warning was unmistakable. Before Catherine could understand the powers she had inherited, she first had to face the people whose lives and positions had just been transformed by the king's proclamation. A proclamation can change the machinery of a monarchy in seconds, but it cannot silence the emotions of a family. Behind closed doors, 4 people were now confronting 4 very different fears. Catherine feared failing the crown. William feared losing the woman he loved to duty. Camilla feared becoming irrelevant. And Charles feared that the choice made to preserve his reign might fracture the people closest to him. The announcement was official. Its human cost had only begun to emerge. Catherine had spent years preparing to support a future king, not to exercise royal authority while both the reigning monarch and the direct heir remained in place. A queen regent was the person temporarily trusted to carry out major duties of the crown, when the sovereign could not manage them personally. That definition sounded simple. The reality was not. She would now approve decisions that could overrule personal wishes, alter family schedules, and place duty ahead of motherhood. Charles found her alone after the announcement and spoke with unusual softness. The king told Catherine that compassion had made her the right choice, because people trusted her to listen before judging. She feared that the same compassion would be called weakness the moment she faced resistance. He rejected that fear. Firmness without humanity, the monarch warned, had brought the institution close to losing the public's faith before. She listened, but the weight in her chest did not lift. William discovered her later beside an untouched cup of tea. The prince sat beside his wife and reached for her hand. Catherine admitted that she was terrified George, Charlotte, and Louis would begin to know her through cancelled evenings and closed doors. He opened his mouth to promise that nothing would change, then stopped. Both of them knew everything already had. Camilla felt that change with brutal speed. The queen consort returned to her private sitting room and removed the royal briefing folder from her desk, after an aide informed her that future state papers would be delivered directly to Catherine. State papers were the official government and royal documents used to prepare the monarch for decisions and meetings. She placed the folder aside carefully, but her silence frightened the aide more than anger would have. Charles then summoned William privately. The monarch confessed, through a recorded conversation prepared for the family archive, that Catherine had not been chosen only because she was dependable. Several senior officials had lost confidence in the household structure surrounding him and Camilla. Too many instructions had crossed. Too many decisions had become blurred. Sophie received an unexpected call that same evening. The trusted confidant was asked to assist Catherine with public duties, confirming that a new circle was already forming. William finally asked his father when the plan had truly begun. Charles looked away and gave no answer. The answer lay in a private royal ceremony weeks earlier, a moment so tense that he later described it as the instant the old arrangement became impossible to defend. The proclamation had not begun with a legal document, a medical briefing, or a constitutional debate. It began during a small investiture rehearsal inside Windsor Castle, where a moment of confusion exposed a far deeper crisis. Charles had watched an instruction ignored, a guest humiliated, and Catherine stepped forward when everyone else froze. What happened in that room lasted less than 10 minutes. Yet those 10 minutes became the private trigger that convinced the king his monarchy required a different center of authority. Charles had already grown tired of conflicting commands moving through the royal household. Camilla's staff issued one instruction, William's team received another, and the central office often discovered changes only after they had been made. An investiture was a formal ceremony in which the monarch honored people for public service. Its order had to be exact because every position, entrance, and introduction carried the king's authority. Catherine had quietly prevented several disputes from reaching him. The princess settled disagreements between charities, younger royals, and senior officials before they became public embarrassments. She never called it power, she called it responsibility. Yet every crisis she solved revealed how weak the old system had become. Camilla changed everything during the Windsor rehearsal. The Queen Consort ordered Sir Jonathan Hale, the late Queen's former equerry, removed from the ceremonial line after he questioned an unauthorized change to the order of precedence. An equerry was a senior royal aide who assisted the sovereign during official duties. Sir Jonathan knew the established order had not been approved, but his objection was treated as defiance. Charles watched the elderly courtier step backward without protest. The king's anger rose instantly as several aides lowered their eyes. His private secretary urged him to avoid an open confrontation before the rehearsal ended, but that warning only deepened his unease. The monarch understood that people were now afraid to defend his own instructions. Catherine crossed the room before anyone else moved. She restored Sir Jonathan to his place, apologized to him directly, and told the staff that no change carrying the sovereign's authority could be imposed without clear approval. He thanked her quietly, while Charles remained close enough to hear every word. Camilla confronted her beside the closed doors. The Queen Consort accused Catherine of undermining her position in front of the household. The princess did not raise her voice. "I protected His Majesty's authority. Those are not the same thing." From the adjoining room, Charles heard the sentence and understood its full meaning. That evening, the king ordered a 6-month audit of ceremonial instructions. An audit was a formal review used to trace who approved decisions and whether proper rules were followed. The documented findings showed repeated attempts to expand Camilla's influence beyond limits he had set. Charles then summoned a constitutional advisor and requested a new regency framework built around Catherine's public trust and William's future succession. When Camilla later discovered that Windsor had triggered the plan, she demanded a private meeting with Catherine and refused to allow a single aide inside. What followed was not a discussion about titles or protocol. It was a face-to-face reckoning between two women who believed they were defending the monarchy from each other. There were no advisors, no private secretaries, and no carefully prepared statements. Catherine entered the room alone. Camilla was already waiting beside the fireplace, holding a copy of the proclamation that had stripped away her access to the crown's daily authority. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Then the queen consort asked the question that had been burning through the palace since the announcement. Had Catherine known this was coming, and had she helped Charles push his own wife aside? Camilla had demanded the meeting the moment she learned that Catherine's office would control state correspondence, royal scheduling, and approval of official household instructions. State correspondence meant the formal messages exchanged between the sovereign, government officials, and the royal household. Whoever controlled that flow controlled what reached the king, when it reached him, and whose voice carried authority. Catherine answered carefully. The princess said she had not known the final wording of the proclamation and had asked Charles to reconsider before it was signed. Yet once the decision became official, refusing the regency would have placed her comfort above the stability of the crown. She would not do that, even if acceptance made her the target of Camilla's anger. Camilla stepped closer. The queen consort accused her of hiding behind duty while accepting the humiliation of another woman. For years, their relationship had remained controlled by public smiles and private restraint. Catherine's popularity had unsettled her. Her seniority had frustrated the future queen. William's plans for a smaller monarchy had only deepened that distrust. Catherine did not retreat. The regent reminded her that the appointment had not erased her title or removed her place beside Charles. A regent was the person authorized to carry out the monarch's duties when the sovereign could not manage them directly. But the proclamation had drawn one hard line. Camilla could no longer issue commands in the king's name without Catherine's approval. Camilla dropped the document onto the table. She warned that affection vanished quickly when power demanded painful choices. Catherine stepped closer and answered without raising her voice. Popularity had not made the appointment. Charles had. Camilla then revealed, through a private letter kept in her personal correspondence box, that the king had once promised she would never be politically or ceremonially isolated during his reign. The queen consort believed that promise gave her the right to resist the spirit of the new arrangement, even if she could not overturn its legal force. Catherine listened, but refused to surrender. The regent said a private promise could not be used to blur the authority of a public proclamation. Camilla moved a chair from her path, opened the door herself, and delivered the final blow. Then rule your household. Catherine walked into the corridor without replying. Her hands began to shake, only after the door closed. William was waiting outside. The prince learned that the letter might now be used to challenge the meaning of his father's decision. Yet the letter was only a personal promise, while the proclamation had been built upon forces far stronger than private loyalty, and those forces were already closing ranks around Catherine. Catherine had been named Queen Regent by one man, but no monarch acts in isolation when the foundations of the crown are at stake. Behind the historic proclamation stood a carefully assembled alliance: constitutional advisors, senior household officials, William, Anne, and the king himself. Each had reached the same unsettling conclusion, for a different reason. Charles needed rest. The institution needed discipline. And someone trusted by both the family and the public had to take command before private rivalry became a constitutional weakness. Charles remained sovereign. The king still wore the crown, approved the deepest matters of state, and held the final constitutional authority. The proclamation simply delegated defined responsibilities to Catherine, including official audiences, ceremonial approvals, household coordination, and communication with government representatives. Delegated authority meant power temporarily entrusted to another person without surrendering the monarch's position. William supported the arrangement because he believed it offered the safest path through his father's withdrawal. The prince also knew advisors had considered giving him equal authority, then rejected the idea. Such a move could have looked like an impatient heir forcing an early transfer of power. He accepted the reasoning, but the decision still wounded him. Supporting Catherine meant protecting the monarchy while quietly setting aside his own expected place. Anne offered no easy comfort. The Princess Royal believed Catherine possessed discipline without hunger for status, but she warned that kindness would not protect her from resentment. The regent answered that she did not expect protection. She expected honest counsel, especially when her decisions became unpopular. Catherine reached the king's private office before her first official briefing and stopped outside. She could not make herself cross the threshold. An official briefing was a closed meeting where sensitive state and royal matters were explained before decisions were made. Anne approached, adjusted the ceremonial pin on Catherine's coat, and lowered her voice. "You are not taking his place," she said. "You are holding it steady." Catherine entered. Charles then opened the sealed supplementary instruction. The king confirmed that Catherine could restructure the senior household and suspend any unofficial channel, causing confusion around his commands. He named William and Anne as her principal family advisors, placing both inside the formal chain of authority. Camilla was left outside it. The monarch addressed his staff with brutal clarity. Objections could be raised privately, but once Catherine made a lawful decision under the proclamation, it had to be obeyed, as though it came directly from him. No competing order, no private correction, no hidden exception. William watched his wife absorb the full weight of that command. Anne remained beside her, calm but alert. Catherine understood that authority had now become action. Her first directive targeted overlapping instructions, linked to Camilla's office. Several roles were suspended. 2 aides resigned within hours. One longtime servant broke down after being told his position had been removed. By nightfall, the proclamation was no longer a historic announcement on palace paper. It had begun removing names, closing offices, and changing lives. The first day of Catherine's regency did not begin with applause. It began with cancelled meetings, reassigned staff, locked briefing cabinets, and a handwritten list of offices that would no longer operate independently. Every change had a practical explanation. Every name carried a human cost. By noon, senior courtiers understood that the new regent was not acting as a ceremonial substitute. She was dismantling the confusion that had surrounded Charles, and the people who benefited from that confusion were beginning to fall. Catherine issued her first directive before breakfast. The regent merged 3 competing scheduling teams into one central office, and required every royal instruction to carry a traceable authorization from Charles, herself, or an approved senior advisor. Traceable authorization meant that each command had to show exactly who approved it, preventing private orders from being passed off as the sovereign's wishes. The consequences came quickly. Several engagements promoted by Camilla's staff were postponed, while funding, security, and protocol arrangements were reviewed. Protocol meant the official rules that control royal ceremonies, precedents, and public conduct. The delays mattered, because charities had already prepared, guests had been invited, and every cancellation risked looking like punishment rather than reform. Camilla arrived for a scheduled charity briefing and found the meeting reassigned to Catherine's office. The Queen Consort turned to her longtime aide and demanded that the change be reversed. He lowered his voice and told her it could not be undone. For the first time, she understood that the new authority was not symbolic. It was already closing doors she once opened without asking. Catherine felt every consequence. After approving the restructuring, she shut the office door and admitted to Sophie that each signature felt like a personal rejection. The trusted confidant reminded her that avoiding pain would only preserve the confusion. Still, the regent confessed that necessary decisions did not become painless simply because they were right. Camilla returned to her rooms and removed her diary from the desk. The queen consort found several future engagements marked "under review." She tore one page free in anger, then stopped, staring at the damage she had caused with her own hand. William approached Catherine before evening and asked whether she wanted him to intervene. The prince offered to speak privately with Camilla and soften the blow. She refused. Her first day of authority could not end with her husband negotiating away a decision she had just made. He understood, but the distance between duty and marriage suddenly felt dangerous. An outgoing staff member then revealed through a recorded exit interview that a private message had been sent to several royal patrons, urging them to resist Catherine's system until Charles personally reversed it. The message came from a device registered to Camilla's household, yet its wording felt calculated, almost designed to exploit her anger and provoke a deeper split. Catherine made a startling choice. She ordered no formal investigation. Instead, she asked Charles to meet her alone, without William, Camilla, advisors, or legal papers between them. For the first time since the proclamation, Catherine would speak not to the sovereign who appointed her, but to the tired father-in-law who had placed the survival of his reign in her hands. The room contained no officials and no symbols of ceremony beyond the crown embossed on a closed dispatch box. Charles sat beside the window, looking older than he had during the proclamation. Catherine did not bow, deliver a report, or ask for guidance. She simply took the chair opposite him and spoke the question she had suppressed since hearing her name announced. Why me? The king's answer would transform the regency from a burden she feared into a duty she finally understood. Catherine had already seen how far the role reached. She had changed offices, delayed engagements, and issued commands that carried the force of the crown. Yet she still could not understand why Charles had bypassed William, Camilla, and a council of senior royals. A council would have spread authority across several people. Instead, he had placed the weight on one person, and that person was her. Charles listened without interruption. For the first time, no private secretary, constitutional advisor, or family member stood between them. Catherine admitted that she feared becoming harder and more distant. George, Charlotte, and Louis already felt the pull of royal duty. She could not bear the thought of becoming another closed door in their lives. Charles lowered his eyes. The king confessed, through a personal statement written before the proclamation, that he had spent decades preparing for power, but almost no time preparing for its loneliness. He knew what authority could take from a person. He refused to let Catherine enter that loneliness without understanding the cost. Catherine then asked the question neither of them could avoid. Was this appointment meant to punish Camilla? Charles answered at once. No. The monarch opened the dispatch box, a secure case used to carry sensitive royal and government papers, and removed the statement he had never delivered. In it, he had written that Catherine possessed something the institution could not create, through training, title, or tradition. She could make duty feel human without making the crown appear weak. Charles went further. William's future reign, he explained, would need more than affection and loyalty. It would need a partner who had already faced criticism, power, sacrifice, and the pain of choosing the institution over personal comfort. The regency was not only an emergency solution, it was preparation for a united reign. Catherine stopped asking whether she deserved the position. The regent promised instead to use it without revenge, including toward Camilla. She would protect the king, steady the household, and refuse to turn authority into punishment. Charles reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. Mercy, he said, must always remain available. Confusion could not. Catherine left the room ready for her first public appearance as Queen Regent. Beyond the palace gates, the proclamation was already spreading across Britain and the world. The private doubts had been settled, but outside the palace, millions were about to decide what Catherine's elevation meant for the monarchy they believed they knew. By sunrise, Catherine's face was everywhere. Television anchors abandoned planned broadcasts. Newspaper presses ran through the night. Crowds appeared outside Buckingham Palace, carrying flowers, flags, and handwritten messages of support. Yet the reaction was not universally celebratory. Some saw continuity. Others saw a quiet revolution hidden beneath constitutional language. And when the new regent stepped from the palace for her first public duty, one unforgettable image captured the country's mood. Catherine walking forward alone, before turning to invite William to stand beside her. Catherine now carried delegated authority, meaning Charles remained king while she performed specific duties in his name. Broadcasters called it the most dramatic internal transfer of royal responsibility in modern times. The palace moved quickly to explain that the monarch had not abdicated and William had not been removed from the succession. Abdication meant a sovereign formally giving up the throne. Nothing of that kind had happened, but the public still sensed that the balance of power had shifted. William felt every camera searching his face. The prince knew commentators were studying his silence during the proclamation, asking whether pride had hidden resentment. He answered without an interview or formal statement. When Catherine paused outside the palace, he stepped beside her at her invitation and allowed her to lead. The gesture was simple, but it ended hours of speculation. Catherine faced a country divided between admiration and suspicion. Supporters praised her calm service and years of discipline. Critics questioned whether too much authority had been concentrated in one person without a coronation or election. A coronation was the formal ceremony in which a monarch was crowned. Yet Catherine's power had arrived before any such moment. The public reaction became impossible to ignore at the Victoria Memorial. Copies of the Crown Chronicle rose above the crowd beneath the huge headline, "She holds the realm." People began chanting Catherine's name as the newspaper's full-width photographs spread from hand to hand. Eleanor Marsh gave the moment its most powerful description during a live national broadcast. The veteran presenter called the appointment not the replacement of a king, but the arrival of a tested queen before her coronation. Her words were repeated across the country within minutes. Catherine then arrived at a memorial reception and noticed an elderly veteran struggling to rise. She stepped away from protocol, asked him to remain seated, and spoke to him at eye level. William watched as the exchange softened the room. The regent had answered fear with humanity, not performance. Camilla followed the coverage from a private room. The queen consort did not issue a counterstatement. Instead, she sent Catherine a brief written message acknowledging the dignity of the appearance. Catherine read it twice. The country had delivered its judgment in cheers, criticism, and expectation. Now the family itself needed one final answer before the new royal order could truly stand. The proclamation had been described as a seizure of influence, a royal revolution, and the beginning of a new reign. In truth, it became something far more human. Charles had not surrendered his crown. Catherine had not stolen another woman's place. William had not been pushed aside. Each had been forced to choose between pride and preservation. And when the family gathered privately after the first public appearance, the final meaning of the regency emerged not through another legal order, but through a gesture no proclamation could command. Charles brought Catherine, William. The king made the position clear from the beginning. The regent's authority was settled, and the arrangement would not be renegotiated. A regency was a temporary transfer of royal duties, while the sovereign remained on the throne. It protected continuity without replacing the monarch, and that distinction now defined every person in the room. Catherine spoke first. The regent confirmed that the household reforms would remain because the old confusion had placed Charles's authority at risk. Yet she also promised that Camilla's charitable work, public dignity, and place beside the king would be protected. Her power would create order, not revenge. Camilla held her silence before finally answering. The queen consort admitted, through that private family conversation, that her anger had come from fear. She feared losing Charles, losing relevance, and losing the identity she had spent decades building. Catherine replied that the proclamation did not demand affection between them. It demanded honesty and respect. Camilla then reached into her handbag and removed the old royal briefing key. The queen consort placed it in Catherine's palm, without ceremony. That key had once opened the cabinets containing sensitive schedules and state information. Now it represented the authority she had been forced to release. Catherine closed her fingers around it. The regent promised that no decision concerning Charles's personal welfare would ever be hidden from his wife. The gesture did not erase their wounds, but it ended the struggle over who held command. William stood beside Catherine without hesitation. The prince understood that her regency strengthened rather than threatened his future. Their partnership had changed because both now knew the loneliness of royal authority, and both understood the sacrifices their next reign would demand. Charles gave the final judgment. The king said the proclamation had succeeded because it stopped power from becoming a private possession. Authority had been placed where it could best protect duty, trust, and continuity. Anne offered the last moral truth. The Princess Royal reminded them that the crown survived only when service became greater than status. Her words ended the argument. Charles remained king. Catherine stood as Queen Regent. William remained heir. Camilla accepted a dignified but clearly defined role. And so the historic proclamation reached its final verdict. Catherine did not rise because the crown had fallen. She rose because Charles believed she was the one person capable of holding it steady until the monarchy was ready for its next reign. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.